I want to talk a bit about a comment Vladimir Putin made last week, which was to say that the children's author JK Rowling, they've cancelled her. Now they're trying to cancel a 1,000-year country, referring to Russia. What have you made of Putin's supposed support for our beloved children's author, Harry Potter author, JK Rowling?
Marriage made in heaven, as some people on social media seem to be viewing it as. I mean, it's funny that people can go from so quickly suggesting that Putin is a madman, that everything that comes out of his mouth is fake news, that he's, not to be believed, kill him, kind of, all that kind of rhetoric, to then saying, but he's right on JK Rowling, and sort of, everyone from Billy Bragg to, actually people who should know better in terms of being more involved in politics, coming out and saying, now, Miss Rowling, will you denounce your heresy because you have the worst man in the world supporting your position? And, Thomas, you put in your article, I think it was, the JK Rowling came back with a perfectly reasonable response saying, well, excuse me, I will not take, I'm not going to take lectures from someone who's poisoning their own people, killing, trying to wipe out a nation, all the rest of it. But even that didn't satisfy people. Yeah. There was articles that said, well, what a kind of terse response, a weak response. It's like, what do you want this woman to do? And would you like to have lists of the people that support you published online? This is a really kind of crass understanding of what it means to hold a political view, that whether it's on gender or anything else, that if you have to have saintly followers or else it's not legitimate. It's also the case that it's not a legitimate thing that Putin was saying. It is, as Tom called it, grotesque to compare what he's doing to protect the history of Russia with what JK Rowling is arguing about protecting women-only spaces. But the kind of the desire to utilize Putin's words for this kind of very, in the grand scheme of what's going on in Europe, relatively petty row about gender, to try and say something larger or more principled about Putin is pretty degrading and tells you how little they know about what's actually going on in relation to Russia and Ukraine.
Tom?
Yeah, I think it was interesting because if you want to use the phrase kind of useful idiots, I think it definitely applies to the people who were jumping up and down as soon as they saw this. Because in part, this was a sort of troll, really. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that, Putin is playing like 3D chess, that, all of these troll farms pumping out memes to wind up Americans on Facebook so that they'll go out and vote for Trump or whatever. It's, kind of just fuels the sort of slightly ridiculous Russiagate idea that memes, won the election, fired out of Moscow or whatever. But at the same time, it's quite clear that he does indulge in this kind of thing because it does kind of spin people out for a couple of days. And, just the crass guilt by association, like the idea that JK Rowling or any of these kind of liberal, gender critical feminists have the same view on social issues as Vladimir Putin. It's just, I mean, they both believe in biological sex. I'm sure they both believe the sky is blue. That doesn't mean that, they're horrendous people and they're allies of Vladimir Putin. So it's the most crass kind of way to just smear people. Also, if you're trying to go about claiming that cancel culture doesn't exist, and it's just a fiction that is indulged in by right-wingers with nothing else to do and autocratic dictators, maybe don't go around trying to smear people you disagree with as, apologists for Putin or whatever. So there's that to it. And it's also just what's so kind of interesting about it, I guess, is just the way in which there is such a enthusiasm for just using this conflict, as you were saying, Ella, to just have out the most petty political arguments possible. And I think that one of the things that kind of reminds us about is that there's been a lot of discussion, particularly in kind of our area of politics or our sort of terrain, if you like, about what the war means for the culture war, if you see what I mean, or what impact will it do? Will it shake us out of all of these kind of different debates and all the rest of it? And I think things like this show that if you're expecting the culture war to just go away because things have gotten serious, then you've got another thing coming. Because for a lot of commentators, for a lot of influential people, even a lot of politicians, the culture war is not just something that it's not like a fad that they become obsessed with. It's the way they see the world. All of these ridiculous issues, all of these petty beefs that they have is essentially just the way in which they operate. And the scale's not just going to fall from their eyes because something more serious has come along. And I think this in its own ridiculous way has demonstrated that, definitely.
I think it really demonstrates the inability of people to kind of zoom out and look at what the bigger picture is. So, there's this kind of weird phenomenon among some right wingers at the moment who have suddenly become real Putin fans because he's really hard on the LGBTQ plus crowd, and we need to get
ain't woke.
Said. Which
Putin never called me racist.
It's like, okay, go spend some time in Petrograd and come back and tell us what it's like. And that's incredibly crass. But there's also this, as Tom had said, the pettiness of this about, he's mentioned JK Rowling by name. You just want to say, hang on a minute. Are you for the country that locks up artists, that imprisons people who criticize anything relating to the political regime, that locks up thousands and thousands and thousands of protesters and is beating people on the streets for holding up signs? Or are you for the country that believes that we should be able to voice opinions on Twitter or in the public square or anywhere else on all kinds of issues? And then, obviously most people will hopefully want to say the latter, but those who have been attacking JK Rowling for the last, however many years aren't really able to answer that because they're not for the free society, because they don't believe in free speech and they don't get to hold those principles. They refuse to. So it leaves them in, never mind the fact that JK Rowling is supposed to be shamefaced now because she's been outed by, having Putin as a fan. But the people who should be ashamed in this context is those who will still refuse, even at this point when we have the most stark example of censorship and state repression in relation to what's going on under Putin's autocratic regime, to not even be able to have the humility to understand how important free speech is in their own nation.